News alert, a handshake. President Obama and Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez shaking hands. Can you believe it? This is the same guy who called President Bush the devil at the United Nations and said that President Obama has the same stench as President Bush. Awkward. Well, at least it was not a high five or a hug or worse, a bow. The two came face to face at the Summit of the Americas on the island of Trinidad. So what's up with the handshake? Good mood, bad mood, or just plain awkward? Former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich joins us live. Mr. Speaker, good evening. And what do you make of the fact that Hugo Chavez and our president shaking hands?
Well, look, the president recently bowed to the Saudi king. He has been friendly to the Iranians despite their 7,300 centrifuges making a nuclear weapon. He basically backed off on his threats to the North Koreans. He has made life easier for the Castro dictatorship in Cuba. Why not embrace or at least be cheerful and friendly with Hugo Chavez? I think it sends a terrible signal to all of Latin America and a terrible signal about how the new administration regards dictators. But this is an administration which doesn't want us to drill offshore, doesn't want us to find new oil and gas, so we become even more dependent on the Saudis and the Venezuelans. So apparently being nice to the dictators is the way he intends to get oil. I think we'd be a lot better off drilling offshore in the United States and getting American energy rather than being nice to dictators.
What's the precise downside to, in your opinion, to President Obama talking to Hugo Chavez?
I don't think there's any downside to talking to him, but I think being friends, taking a picture that clearly looks like they're buddies, hurts in all of Latin America. Chavez has a big propaganda machine. They're going to be putting that picture all over Latin America. Chavez is going to say, see, I'm the future. Being an anti-American dictator is just fine. And the Americans need the oil so desperately that they will be nice to me no matter what I do. I think that's the real danger, is how does that picture get used all across Latin America? And what signal does it send to other dictators? If this is going to be, much like Jimmy Carter, a pro-dictator administration, then I think, frankly, it sends a very sad signal about human rights around the world.
In January, the president said that he wasn't going to be doing any talking with Chavez until Chavez at least had sort of denounced or moved away from supporting the revolutionary people in Colombia. Does that have any bearing on this whatsoever?
No, I think that the president's words often don't last very long. Remember, last Sunday, a week ago, he was going to be very tough with the North Koreans. That lasted until a UN Security Council meeting where the Chinese and the Russians refused to support him. Then that disappeared. I don't see any evidence that the president's words in January have any meaning on the president's grin and handshake in April. This is a very shallow administration that follows very shallow policies.
All right, let me switch gears to a speech that the president gave this week in Washington at Georgetown University. The White House asked that some religious symbols at the Catholic University, Georgetown University, be covered up during the speech. The university acquiesced. It is now beginning to sort of get out there, become somewhat of a controversy. What's your thought on this?
Well, it should be a controversy. First of all, the university should have refused. If the president wants to go to a Catholic university, he should respect the symbols of Catholicism and understand the importance of those symbols. Second, this is an administration which has nominated Judge Hamilton, who said that using Jesus Christ in a prayer was somehow wrong, but that saying Allah was fine. That's frankly should be filibustered in the Senate, and that judge should never get through. Third, you recently had two Democratic legislators in Connecticut introduce a state-level bill that would literally abolish the Catholic Church in Connecticut. People need to understand there's this underlying pattern of secular hostility to religion that's very real and that may show up again if the administration tries to eliminate the conscience clause, which has allowed doctors who are Catholic or evangelical Christians or Orthodox Jews to not perform abortions because their conscience won't permit it. There's serious talk the administration is going to try to strip the right of religious conscience from Americans.
The whole thing was rather, surprising to me that they even chose that venue if indeed they wanted to sort of, at least at least hide part of the venue, which is so important to the university. But anyway, let me talk about the Tea Parties and the media coverage of the Tea Parties. There have been many people in the media who have been quite vulgar about the Tea Parties, using sexual references and jokes to belittle the protester. Surprised about that or not?
No, I think we're in a deep cultural war, and I think the Tea Parties were a direct threat to the elite left, and the elite left is going berserk. I was at a Tea Party, as you know, in New York City at City Hall. It had 12,500 people there. It was led by a 26-year-old, Kellen Gaida, who's a nice young guy who's founded a small business, has 3 employees. His partner in launching it was an African American. The audience was young. It was from every political party, and I think I was very excited to be there. Somehow, if you're a peace movement and a peace protest, then you're somehow sanctified by the elite media. But if you're for smaller government and you're worried about big debt, then somehow that's inappropriate behavior.
But it's sort of interesting. It's not just sort of a disagreement with the substance. It went even further when you start sort of laughing and using vulgar references on the air about it. I mean, you're taking it a step further. You're not saying that the person, you disagree with the person. You're not saying that. You're saying something, you know, much, and it's much different.
Look, this is a situation where anyone who happily and cheerfully stands for smaller government, lower taxes, less power in Washington, anyone who stands up for the rights of the American people is going to be vilified in the media. And frankly, look what the Department of Homeland Security wrote this week. If you are pro-life, you're a potential terrorist. If you're a returning veteran, you're a potential terrorist. If you are in favor of the Second Amendment right to bear arms, you're a potential terrorist. If you like smaller government, more decentralization, lower taxes, you're a potential terrorist. I think we need to understand that on the left, there is a deep hostility to anybody who's overtly patriotic, overtly for smaller government, overtly for taking power out of Washington.
Mr. Speaker, I asked on Greta Wire, the blog, if anyone had any questions for you tonight, and Brenda L. had a question for you, which said, and I guess it's in light of the fact that there are people from both parties who attended these Tea Parties, Republican, Democrats. She says, I think we should have a third party, and it should be called the American Principle Party. And some people have even said that a third party may arise out of these Tea Parties. Is that at all possible that a third party would arise, and is that a good idea or not?
Well, I think if the Republican Party doesn't accommodate the energy and the drive of all these new people, and if it doesn't become ultimately the vehicle for their hopes, you could have something like that happen. But I think you have a number of people, Congressman John Boehner and Congressman Aaron Cantor, for example, working very hard to find a way to bring all these elements together. Reagan faced this challenge in the late 1970s, and ultimately he found a way to bring economic conservatives, social conservatives, and national security conservatives together. What I was struck by the other night in New York was these were not folks who had been in politics ever before. These are people frightened by the $9 trillion of debt that they see coming down the road under this administration.
Is this, though, a one-time deal? I mean, that really is the question, and maybe people have been struggling with it. They're talking about the last 2 days ad nauseum. But is this just sort of, you know, it's tax day, let's go out, let's make a statement that, you know, whatever the protesters are making a statement about, that the government is spending too much? Or is this truly something, you know, a much larger movement?
Adam Waldeck at American Solutions has been their leader on the Tea Party movement, and Rick Tyler at the Center for American Leadership for Renewing American Leadership has been working on Tea Parties. Both of them report to me that there are many, many people saying, what do we do next? How do we keep it going? You know, when people realize, for example, Greta, how many $1 trillion the Federal Reserve has been spending without any oversight, without any transparency, without any accountability, I think the anger and the demand for more citizen movement is going to go up, not down. I think this is the beginning of a long-term movement, not just a momentary event.
I think it'll be dependent upon whether our economy rebounds quickly. If the economy rebounds quickly, it's a one-day deal. If not, I think we'll see more. You disagree with me on that? That it's not the economy is not the indicator?
Look, the Obama budget that's in negotiations right now between the House and Senate has $9 trillion in additional debt. That means a 20-year-old today would pay $114,000 in taxes just to pay interest on the debt in their lifetime without paying a penny of principal. When the average American realizes these politicians are using credit cards like crazy and don't intend to pay any of it, but intend to leave office dumping it on your children and grandchildren, I don't care what happens to the economy, the fight over whether or not politicians ought to dump debt on you is going to get bigger and bigger as people learn the facts.
Mr. Speaker, if you stand by, we're going to have much more with you.